Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawkblogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser, and I'm really excited about the show today. We get the crew back together. It's been a while since we've had a chance to do a crossover roundtable with Rob Staton of Seahawks Draft Blog and Griff Sturgeon of the Seattle Overload podcast. And man, I got to tell you guys, it's been great to have a little bit of a slow period of time. But there's something going on in my office right now. I have to let you know that could affect our show today. There's a cricket somewhere in my office, and he's been there for days. And he is I cannot find him. And just throughout the show, I'll just hear this little chirp. So hopefully it's not going to show up in the actual audio of the show, but it's in my brain, like it's in my soul at this point that I've got this cricket chirp. And you just might see me start twitching at some point. So if you've got any tips for how to get rid of a single cricket somewhere in your house, let me know.
That's hilarious. Have you looked up like how to trap a cricket or something?
I literally asked AI that this morning, and they're like, yeah, something about molasses and like they're attracted to sweet things. So I might have to do like a sticky, sugary trap later today.
That's like hilariously annoying. Like, thing to have.
It's kind of like hilarious, like madly, like I'm gonna go crazy hilarious.
Yeah.
The only cricket I know about is the sport that we play over here, which is a marvelous game, by the way. I don't really understand why it's not taken off in the States, but it's cricket season.
Never say never. I mean, gosh, like paddleball took 50 years and it's gone crazy, and obviously There's a bunch of sports that have really taken off of late in the U.S. So who knows? Maybe Highlight is next on the list. Anything could happen. So first, before we get into the details of all the stuff going on here Seahawks wise, let's catch up with what you guys have been doing for this downtime in the Seahawks offseason. Rob, how about you? Obviously, you got your day job. What's going on for you this time of year?
Yes. So this is typically the quietest part of my year with the day job, but this year it's not. And anybody who follows us on Twitter might understand a little bit of what's been going off there. But we have one of the local teams going through a big story at the minute. So I've got that going on. I might be going to Spain with one of the other local teams in a couple of weeks. So that's coming up. We're doing a live. I'm doing a live show in front of 500 people next week, and we have been told that we can drink and swear during this show. So that is most unusual for the BBC to give you that carte blanche to do that. So I'm very much looking forward to that next Friday. But apart from that, just counting down the days to when week one, because I'm going to be in Seattle for week one. So I'm very much looking forward.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. I've bought a ticket for the Mariners game as well up there, which I don't know if that was a wise move, but I'm going to be in Seattle for week one. I'm going to the Niners game.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to catch up. That'd be great to see you. How about you, Griff? What's going on for you? Like, you just came off another podcast, man. So like you're in heat of the moment.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a lull period there in terms of internet appearances. Been lying low for the most part. Was out at Whidbey Island yesterday or the day before with my dad. That was fun. But yeah, I've been getting out in nature a lot, taking full advantage of the season. It's that time of year. Been getting lost a lot too. I kind of have ADHD brain when I step into the woods. I just don't pay attention. I'm like listening to something, and I'll turn around like, where am I? Then you got to figure out where you are, which is always fun. Just been lying low. Yeah, it's quiet on the football front. Not a lot's been going on. There's been some like rumors, but it's hard to parse what is real, what isn't. So just kind of wait and see there. But yeah, it's that time of year where you have to force yourself to come up with things, whereas the football isn't coming to you. You have to go to the football type of thing.
This is true.
Which I'm sure for you, especially having to create daily content. So,
and I don't have to, and I've taken some days off. I did the 365 straight days last year and told folks I was not going to continue to do that. And I've been going through and doing positional rankings for the different NFC West. And I've really enjoyed that the past week. I've learned a lot. I don't know if anyone else is enjoying it, but I've enjoyed it. And so as long as I'm enjoying it, I'll keep doing it. But that actually leads me to one of the things I wanted to talk with you guys about, because I mean, obviously I follow you guys and I see what you're writing and tweeting and all that kind of stuff. And as I've been going through these, different parts of the rosters in the NFC West, I've kind of found like I've unearthed a few aspects of these rosters that are not really well discussed, and maybe are a little bit of secrets around what's going on in this division. And you know, obviously, I'm crazy doing this every day, but I'm curious for you guys if there are storylines, players, coaches, position groups across the NFC West. It could be Seahawks specific. It could be to any of the other groups that kind of have your attention. You think maybe you're not getting enough attention. And Griff, I thought maybe I'd start with you on that
one. Man, I feel like all 4 teams in the NFC West, I mean, maybe it's not being talked enough about outside of like our circles, talked enough about how much all 4 teams kind of feel like they're walking like the tightrope right now. Like all 4 teams could teeter in one direction, and maybe way more dramatically than discussed. I mean, the Rams, if Stafford's elbow flares up again, they're done. Like, forget it. Like, that's it. As much as I think they're doing some right things to kind of course correct, like the backbone of their team, it still doesn't matter if Stafford, falls off a cliff, which could happen at his age. The 49ers defense, I mean, we know how they were trending last year. And what if they don't, what if they can't find air again, if they can't climb back up the mountain there. And like that probably puts them into 8, 9, 10 win territory. Because as much as we make a big deal about Kyle Shanahan, and rightfully so, like their defense is also, as we know, has been a huge reason for them being contenders. You need both sides of the ball. The Seahawks, there's a lot of potential in the offense, but we don't know exactly what it will look like just because there's been so much change, and you just have to let the results bear out, right? But it could go a variety of directions. And then the Cardinals, like, are they going to keep improving marginally, or are they going to plateau and have to make a tough decision at quarterback eventually? So I feel like all 4 teams are kind of undefined, and arguments in all directions, but it's really just time will tell, which is always the case, but it feels like it's more the case than normal. So
yeah, those are all great. And Rob, it doesn't feel like there's a Titan in the NFC West the way that there has been in past years. So I'm not even necessarily across the NFC, but just, it's typical that the NFC West winner is the one that goes to the Super Bowl, at least over the last 15, 20 years. It doesn't seem like that's the likely outcome even necessarily right now. What about you? Like, what are the things that it doesn't have to be a laundry list, but what's something that comes to your mind of maybe not discussed enough?
I think just quickly before I go on to that, I think you made just a good point about there not being a Titan in the NFC, because if you'd have thought, where were the Eagles a year ago? The head coach is under an awful lot of pressure. They'd just had a horrendous end to the season, and they didn't look like they were going to start the year finishing it the way that they did. And I think there was a game against the Browns where they squeezed through, and Sirianni was like flagging off the fans and stuff like that. And it just felt like a team that wasn't going anywhere. And then by the end of the year, they're hammering Mahomes and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And you think, oh, of course, the perception of the Eagles now is that, well, of course, they were unbelievable all year and they were always destined to win the Super Bowl. That wasn't the case. And I think what we're going to find next year is that someone is probably going to get to the Super Bowl from the NFC. And when you get to the end of the year, everyone's going to go, yep, see, we always knew they were really good. But I think right now there's probably a handful of teams, maybe even more than a handful, who could be that team. It is a lot more wide open than the AFC, where you've got your established contenders. And I think that's what makes the NFC very interesting. When you suggested we were going to do this, my main thought, I don't think gets talked about enough, is I think the Niners are in their managed decline stage of the franchise. It reminds me a little bit of when, the Seahawks were this unbelievable team, and then they had to start paying everybody, and then everybody started getting a bit older, and then you have to make some decisions on who you want to keep and who you want to move on from. And then there are certain players that you keep a little bit longer, and maybe there are certain players you move on from a little bit too quickly. And I feel as if they're in a more extreme version of what Seattle was in. And when the Seahawks were going through that, they did manage that decline quite well. They would still win 10 games. They would still make the playoffs. They still felt like a team that you wouldn't necessarily want to face in the playoffs if you could pick your opponent. Whereas the Niners had, a 6-win season last year. And they seem very capable of having a 6, 7, 5-win season if things go wrong. So I think the secret for me, the main one, is there is a huge amount of pressure on Kyle Shanahan. I think he can have the odd season like he had last year, but typically he's been able to bounce back from that. If he doesn't bounce back from that next season, if they have another season like they did last year, there's going to be a huge amount of pressure from him. You know, the media in San Francisco is a little bit different than it is in Seattle. There's going to be some prominent voices there who are challenging him and questioning him. You also have an ownership group that is, I don't know how familiar you guys are with this. The Niners ownership group have gone all in on British football, soccer. They've essentially bought one team, which is quite close to me. They've now bought another team in Scotland, and they're sending like Murad, the guy who used to be with the Niners, is like running both of those teams now. And it's almost as if I don't know if they're getting distracted or if they're looking at that and thinking maybe this, that's where a lot of the focus is going. And I don't know. To me, it just feels as if there's just something not quite right with the Niners. And then a final point on this, you've got, the state of their weapons. Like, what is Christian McCaffrey now? Can he ever get back to anything close to his best? What's Brendan Ayuk going to be like this year? Deebo Samuel's gone now. George Kittle's a quality player, but he's 32. You've now got a quarterback who is not the plucky underdog anymore. He's now you better get out there and throw 35 touchdowns this season because you're getting paid to do that. And then you look at the defense, and obviously Bosa's there, and obviously Warner's there, and they're quality players. But there's a lot of youth in that group now, and there's going to be a lot of, let's hope that Nick Bosa can get us a sack on this play, I think, to get them through. So I think they're a team that probably have seen better days now and are drifting a little bit. And maybe we're coming to the end of an era for the Niners.
There's a lot in there, and let's double click on that for a second, because there's a few specific ones in there that come to mind for me about the Niners in particular. One of them was the 49ers wide receiver room, which when I looked at that this week, I was like, whoa. So Ayuk, ACL, MCL, there's questions about whether he'll start the year on PUP, might not be there for the first week against the Seahawks. You've got Demarcus Robinson, who they signed, who's likely going to be suspended for the first few games of the season. And then you've got Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings. And, maybe you think highly of Jacob Cowing, but it's thin. And I see a lot of people, you said something about Deebo Samuel, and that was one of the ones I was going to bring up. People they just brush this aside of like, well, Deebo Samuel's not there, but he wasn't good anymore. Okay, but how are you going to replace good Deebo Samuel? Like, you didn't have good Deebo Samuel last year, and it was a problem for the Niners. And people think, oh, it's been years since he was good. 2023, when they went to the Super Bowl, Deebo Samuel had over 1,100 yards from scrimmage and 12 touchdowns. And then last year, he was down to 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. That was a problem for that team. And I don't think they figured out how to replace his production yet. So you add into that the Brandon Ayuk question mark. And I'm like, and then you got Ricky Pearsall, who you have to hope makes a big leap in his second year. It feels like a bit of a house of cards, for that part of the offense. And to your point, Rob, Christian McCaffrey was not the same guy when he came back last year. He got injured again. And it's not like the first time in his career that it's been injured, and he's older now. So I feel like the offense is what's made that team tick. And I just see all sorts of question marks there, but yet people if you look at any preseason kind of rankings, the 49ers are number 1 in the division in most of the cases. And I see a lot of risk there.
Yeah. I think that is curious, the national perception of where where that's coming from of why people are expecting the 49ers to bounce back. Maybe it's the year-to-year yo-yoing that Shanahan does. Bad year, good year, bad year, good year. I think a lot of it hinges on, I think Kyle will rally around a lot hinges on Brandon Ayuk's status probably, and him being a workhorse again. George Kittle's age is scary, but I think it just goes back to that. It's like a house of cards, like you said. It's kind of flimsy. If they're all healthy, then yeah, you can do a lot of damage with that. But one guy not being 100%, and you could see it kind of crumbling a little bit. So I don't know. This team, this division might be a bloodbath this year in the sense that all teams are kind of being pushed toward 8 wins instead of 10. And who comes out on top of that, who gets lucky here or there, who gets the one lucky bounce. But it's a hard division to forecast just because I see volatility on both sides of the coin.
Well, and a guy we haven't even talked about there is Trent Williams. I mean, talk about one guy, and if he's out, they lose. Pretty much 100% of the time when he's out, they lose. Who knows what he's going to be this year? So yeah, that one's certainly up there for me. I turn my attention to the Seahawks. One that I want to throw out to you guys. He's on the thumbnail, so this is probably a worst kept secret of the episode. But Nicky Manwari is a guy that the Seahawks took early second round. They traded up to get him. He had a historic combine athletically. He's got, things to work on. When I hear people talk about rookies, when I hear people talk about the Seahawks, I never hear them mention Nicky Manwari. And I'm not sure, Griff, I'm going to come to you first on this because I know you've thought about this a lot with him. I don't know if people think about him as a corner since he's been playing a lot of nickel. I don't know if people think about him as a safety. I don't think people know what to make of him yet. And maybe that's part of why he's not talked about.
Yeah, his definition of what he is right now is a little ambiguous. And I think it's ambiguous for the team and himself. When I think of him in nickel, I think of pure, kind of like the big nickel realm of things where you're in the run fit, you're doing a lot of zone stuff. You'll occasionally match up with guys on early downs, but I don't think he'll be playing nickel, at least on receivers, on a clear passing situation yet. But I think also when people speak in generalities, like the whole NFL media and paramedia landscape, I think that when people say the word nickel, they don't necessarily know what they mean. I don't mean in terms from an ignorant standpoint, but it's such a large phrase at this point, such a loaded term. It can mean so many different things because when you say nickel, you could be saying Kyle Hamilton, who's 6'4", 220, or Justin Coleman, who's 5'9", whatever, $170, right? Like two totally different body types, skill sets, doing totally different things. They just happen to align in the same part of the field. So it can mean a million things. I think Eamon Wari is a safety playing nickel, not a corner playing nickel. That's ironic because now this is more of a hot take of anything. I think Nicky Manwari is best suited as an outside press corner if he dropped maybe 10 pounds. And that's something that was an opinion I had pre-draft, but I don't think Seattle's going to go there with him. I think they're going to try to make him be an interior player. And at 220, 227, whatever he is, that's where he should probably be. That's more of like a Madden pipe dream of mine. But so it's going to be more like the zone aspects, the safety aspects of nickel play. I will say, though, I like that they're starting him at nickel because if you look at the other guys that you might bucket him with as prospects historically, and again, you can differentiate and nitpick the differences between the guys I'm about to list off, but like Taylor Mays, Melifonwu, Isaiah Simmons, the really tall, big, linearly explosive athletes, all those guys, even Jeremy Chin, who's maybe is the best player of all those guys, they all end up at nickel after years of bouncing them around safety, linebacker, different types of safety, deep safety, slot safety, down safety. Then they end up at nickel as kind of like, well, where else do we put this guy? I think by starting Eamon Wari at nickel, that's going to be to his benefit as a development for his development arc, because the way that nickel is right now in the league, I mean, you're basically playing linebacker, you're playing safety, you're doing some corner things, you're doing some typical slot things all at the same time. It's like a crash course in NFL interior football right now, interior defensive play. So by doing that, he's getting a little bit of everything, like a sampler, like a smorgasbord of all those things. It will benefit him when he plays deep safety. It will benefit him when he's still technically the safety, but aligned in the box as a dime linebacker. It'll benefit him when the strong safety has to roll down into the slot on a tight end. He'll get a sampling of all the things he'll need to be able to do. So it kind of, in my opinion, it kind of hedges off at the pass some of the issues those other guys have ran into. And if he gets really good at nickel, if he gets really good at the things they're going to ask him to do, it's going to benefit him everywhere else. Whereas playing just one spot, like just say boundary safety only, even if he gets good at that, when they eventually have to put him somewhere else, he's not necessarily going to be able to transfer those boundary safety skills to those other areas. And then it'll be this confusing mess of like, well, where does he fit? And then you get an offseason like, oh, we've got a really good plan for Eamon Worry. And then you end up saying that same thing 3-4 years in a row, which is what, like with Jamal Adams, like, how are we going to use him this year? You know, like, what is there a secret plan for him? Like that verbiage. With Eamon Worry, you want to avoid that kind of language and just say like he's just a football player. So I like that they're starting him at nickel. The weird thing is how many snaps is he going to get as a rookie? Because Devin Witherspoon's also a very good nickel. You don't want to lose him there. You know what I mean? So it's like my question with Eamon Worry is how many snaps is he going to play? Not even so much where is he going to play, but
well, one thing's clear is he's not the pronunciation of his name is a secret for everyone, but at least this group. Eamon Worry, I think I've heard on every other podcast, everyone calls him Eamon Worry, and we'll find out when he's going to have to get people to actually remember how to pronounce his name. So I'm glad Griff's heard it. I've heard it. I think Rob's heard it as well. But Rob, we talk a lot about, it occurs to me, you talk a lot about offensive linemen when they've been tackles and they moved into guard in the NFL, where like, okay, they're going to have protection on either side of them, right? So they're not going to be on an island. And I think the plan for Eamon Worry is similar, right? You're going to have really good safeties behind you. You're going to have good corners on either side of you. You're going to have good linebackers around you. And his potential now is to be this like Swiss Army knife weapon. And one of the things I saw in minicamp was when they blitzed him from depth, like, I mean, off ball, but like that guy covered ground when he was blitzing. He moved at a different pace. And so, look, Cam Chancellor didn't play a lot of snaps his rookie year, and he turned out to be pretty darn good. I'm not saying he's Cam Chancellor, but, you know, do you see the potential for Eamon Worry being an impact player even as a rookie?
Well, I think the thing that's most interesting with him is just how excited Mike McDonald and John Schneider appear to be about him. And given that McDonald's history at Baltimore and the way that he did have Kyle Hamilton, and from what we have been able to sort of learn in 1 year, having players who can create deception and not really tip your hat to the opponent as to what's going to happen. And you mentioned there that covering ground. I mean, we will see a point where he may be lined up a little bit deeper on one snap and then he is blitzing. And how do you account for that? You know, you don't have many players of his size who can move as quickly as he can to get into the backfield and make a play. But then he'll be lined up in the slot and he will be able to cover some receivers, some tight ends. He will be able to play deep, but you can pretty much play him anywhere. And when you listen to McDonald talk about him, and even John Schneider, who's possibly been even more excited, when you know that they traded up for this guy, it wasn't simply a case of he fell into their lap and they thought, what the hell, we'll take a chance here. You know, this is somebody they targeted. By all accounts, it sounds like they would have taken him with the 18th pick if Gray's able to have gone in the top 15, like some people were thinking he might do. You know, they're obviously very, very excited about him. There was a scout for another team who passed on his thoughts on Eamon Worry and said that he was one of the highest rated players on his board, and you know that he loves football and stuff like this. And I think he was extremely highly rated. And if you remember around the combine time, people were saying like top 15 pick himself. And he does, you know, if we're being really honest, he has got a bit of a reputation for being a bit of an arse. And you know, it seems like he fell because of that. And the Seahawks have decided we're comfortable with it. they've got a strong leadership group in the team now, and they're excited to bring him in. I can't wait to see him play. And I think you're right. I think he could have an impact in year one. I think he could be a bit of an X factor player for Seattle. And he isn't going to level anybody. That's not really his game. But that what you mentioned there, that the way that he covers ground, I can imagine him making some plays. And then if they get the ball in his hands, he's quick enough to turn an interception into a big return or even a pick six. So very much looking forward to see what Mike McDonald can do with him.
Well, and one more on that, Griff. A couple things that we've heard from Mike McDonald and from others that have interviewed Mike McDonald. One, he does acknowledge that maybe they didn't blitz as much as they should have last year. They were actually they did not blitz a lot, and that's kind of a staple of Mike McDonald's defense. They get pressure without blitzing. But when they did blitz, they had the number one, EPA per play in the NFL on blitzes. But the other thing that he's mentioned is that people, and Devin Witherspoon's mentioned this, people started to key on him. They knew that he's a good blitzer, and so they kind of knew where he might be coming from. But it occurs to me as we're sitting here talking, if you have a package where the big nickel where you've got Nicky Manwari playing inside and you got Witherspoon on the outside, you have the potential to have a little bit more mystery of where that blitz is coming from. And by the way, Ernest Jones, a few years back, was one of the best blitzing linebackers in the NFL. So I'm wondering if that's a secret as well, is that the Seahawks may become a more varied and more dangerous and more frequent blitzing team.
Yeah, and that was something that perked my ears up too. When he said that initially, because like you said, he didn't rush 6 or more guys in Baltimore very much. He didn't do this past year. He's a 5-man pressure and a 4-man replacement pressure kind of guy, right? With the creepers and the sim pressures and all that. So when he says blitz more, I wonder, does he really mean 6+ guys in the pass rush, or does he just mean more creepers, more sims? Because you're still technically blitzing a second level defender. That doesn't mean that you still have more than 4 or 5 guys doing it, right? So I would want to nail him down and back him into a corner and see what he meant very specifically. But then I also wonder, when you call a play, say a blitz, you can't control what the offense does in terms of they run or pass. Usually when you think blitz, you think pass. You can predict when they're going to throw it. But teams call blitzes all the time. It ends up being a run play. And it's harder to detect that because you see guys coming to the line of scrimmage like they would if it wasn't a called blitz. But with their issues against play action and then circumstantially against the run, I wonder if when he said blitz, if he really had early downs in mind and the whole run pass balance in mind when he said that, because blitzing can be a solution to struggles against play action and also help you against the run, especially when you spend a lot of time in light personnel against heavier personnel. And even more, it could definitely be a piece of that puzzle of helping stuff the run just as an added body at 225 pounds flying off the edge, helping them defend the run a little bit more, as well as helping think the boot game. You get the slot screaming down on the boot contain. That's one way to do it. His speed out, even if he doesn't connect out on the edge, even if he doesn't connect with the quarterback, he's disrupting their boot path. That can totally break the play by itself. At that point, he's either got to check it down or throw it out of bounds or run out of bounds that the quarterback does. So that's something I would think about as well. Yeah, I'm sure that they want to get everything they can out of Eamon Warrior's athleticism. So blitzing would definitely be part of that. Even if he doesn't get home, his speed is such that you want to force them to account for it. Because if the right tackle or the running back is one step late, the play's dead. So yeah, I am curious to see what Mike's got up his sleeve and the necessary scheme adaptations he's going to make going from year 1 to year 2.
I'm going to throw another one at you guys and see if you guys agree. This is a secret. It's just something I'm wondering about. And it's with the Arizona Cardinals. Their running back, James Conner, has been their heart and soul. People talk about Kyler Murray all the time, but you want to see the bellwether of that offense, it has been James Conner. He has been the thing that's made it run. He's going to be 30. He is 30, as a matter of fact. And he runs physically. And if he steps back like just a little bit, how the guy that they drafted, Rob, last year, Trey Hendrickson, didn't have a great rookie year. What would that do to that Cardinals offense, even if they make some progress in other places? What would that do if James Conner maybe is not the same player he's been?
Well, it obviously would hurt them. The Cardinals, for me, just feel like a very uninteresting team. There's very little to get excited about with them. They don't have any sort of defensive players that scare you that much. You've got a lot of respect for Budda Baker, obviously. Everybody will have, but he alone is not going to strike fear into an opponent on offense. At any given day, Kyler Murray, Trey McBride can connect 110 yards, touchdown, whatever. Although it took him forever to get a touchdown to Trey McBride last year, and they can make things happen. But then offensive line's nothing special, like you said. Running back who is getting up on age and a bit of tread on the tires there. They're one of those teams that's strange because they absolutely hammered them. I was just looking at this. They hammered the Rams 41-10 in week 2 last year. And that's the kind of thing you think, well, there is enough there on a given day to cause you some problems. But then by the end of the year, they just look like the same old Cardinals. And I don't think there's anything. I think they're the kind of team that I would expect the Seahawks to have 2 games that are back and forth, like we tend to have against the Cardinals every year, back and forth, and the Seahawks get 2 wins. That to me just feels as if that's the way it's going to go again this year. And until they start legitimately acquiring stars, they don't have the sort of the overall, like Seattle maybe don't have a ton of stars, but they've got a lot of young depth, a lot of blossoming quality. I think they've got a staff that I think is better than Arizona's staff now. And until Arizona either gets that high quality of depth or a few more stars, I just think that they're almost just going to be a team that makes up the numbers a little bit in this, and they'll be on the periphery of things.
Yeah, I could make the case that I think one of the secrets as well is I actually think their cornerback room may be one of the most improved. If things work out, I mean, it's very, very young, but I like what they did there. But I agree. It's hard. I think it's hard for Seahawks fans to take the Cardinals seriously because they kind of they have never beaten Geno Smith when he was here. Like, it's been a while since the Cardinals, beat Geno Smith-led Seahawks team. And so that's part of it. But as I kind of turn my attention to the Rams, Griff, like secrets that might be lurking there, one of the things for me that I feel like nobody's talked about. So Alaric Jackson with the blood clots, their left tackle who they re-signed. You don't know what's going to happen with him. He may miss the season. He may miss whatever. You just don't know. And then Rob Havenstein, the right tackle, had shoulder surgery on both shoulders and is not yet back. You talked about Matt Stafford being the age that he's at. If those tackles aren't there and you're running out at 35-year-old DJ Humphries or however old he is, and Dan Quessenberry, like, what would that look like for that Rams team?
Yeah, I just don't think they'd have the juice. I think Stafford would be under siege. He'd start getting. He might do that thing where veteran quarterbacks just start getting weird in the pocket because they know hits are coming. It's like their football knowledge works against them because they know when it's coming and they become more apprehensive to it. I think Matt Hasselbeck said something like, when he was talking about aging quarterbacks, he was talking about what causes them to age out of the league. And he said for some of them, I think it was in context of Matt Schaub. He was like, for some of them, it's the legs give out. Like your pocket quickness isn't there, or your arm starts to die off. That's usually the most obvious one. But they said the other big one is mentally, you just don't want to take hits anymore. And the mental reps really drain you because it's such a mentally demanding position. And what can accelerate that is like, well, if you don't have good protection, then that's even more, it's draining you even more. We might see Stafford's, willingness to go out there and keep taking hits, get him before his elbow does, or whatever else health thing he's got going on. So yeah, if their tackles their tackles need to be at peak operating condition, really, because they're solid tackles when healthy, but it's not like, Alaric Jackson isn't isn't Whitworth. You've downgraded. He's still a solid player, but you've still downgraded. I mean, their interior would really need to do a carry job, but yeah, I mean, the Rams got to be careful. They don't have a lot of margin for error, I think, is the take home for them. If they're all 100%, they're dangerous. But if they fall off even a little bit, it's kind of the whole thing goes kaput. So,
well, and to that point, one of the things that could go with it, Matt Stafford had a career low interception rate, 1.5% last year. He only threw 8 picks. For all the people that just give him all this praise, he only threw 20 touchdowns as well. Geno Smith ended up with more touchdown passes. So did Kyler Murray, even though Geno got 4 of them in that last game. But Matt Stafford had the same turnover-worthy play rate as Aiden O'Connell, as Sam Darnold. And I think that's something that, if you're talking about adding more pressure, Rob, I don't think that's going to end up helping him increase his performance.
I mean, look, he is a warrior, and he has been, especially when he was in Detroit. And I think that's the one thing. I do think the injury concern is legit. I don't, of all the players, though, I think might be able to handle sort of the idea of getting hit better than most. It probably is Stafford. But I do think if he does get hit, look, he's getting old, isn't he? Whether it's the elbow or anything else. And he didn't play very well last year, Brian. It's great to point that out because he's quite similar to the Rams in totality, really. He played well in the playoffs, and they almost beat the Eagles and came as close to anybody to beat the Eagles. And it almost feels as if people have taken that one game and have then projected that onto the Rams' entire season. And what you have to remember about the Rams season is that they had a bad start. They didn't look very good at the start. They only won the NFC West on common opponent record against a Seattle team that chucked some games away last season and probably should have won the division and didn't. So the Rams squeaked through. They had an unbelievable win against the Bills, which was one of the games of the season, and kudos to them for that. But it was sort of sandwiched around squeezing out a win against the Saints, squeezing out a win against the bad Niners, squeezing out a win against the Jets and the Cardinals, getting handily beaten by the Eagles, losing to the Dolphins, squeezing past the Patriots, winning a game in Seattle in overtime that really Seattle should have won. And that was the reality with the Rams. And when you sort of have those offensive line issues, you have a Stafford who's a year older. I'm a little bit surprised how we went from Stafford's not playing that well to the playoffs, to then all of the talk about whether he was going to get traded, to them sort of committing to him, then all of the weird mystery around that contract. It just feels as if there's something there, like this is a marriage that the Rams are kind of like looking off at other quarterbacks and going, we'd quite like to move on, but what is there to move on to? So let's just come to some kind of awkward arrangement to prolong this for another year. And when you get to that point, it feels like the end of Matt Hasselbeck in Seattle on steroids a little bit. The money's bigger, the stakes are higher, but ultimately they do realize they've got to move on sooner rather than later. I think the fact that they've acquired another first-round pick is indicative of that as well. They will probably go on and try and do that in the next draft. The Stafford era is coming to an end. It's probably after this season. How will it end? Will it end with some glorious success, or will it end with him sort of lying on his back, injured in week 7? That's the big question. Then the other thing with the Rams is, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, very good. There are still some holes in that defense that need to be fixed. Cooper Kupp's gone. There's going to be a lot on Puka Nacua. They've drafted a tight end in round 2, who I don't think is anywhere near as good as the tight end Seattle drafted in round 2. McVay's always going to put an offensive product on the field that's going to be somewhat successful. They're going to have games like they did against the Bills. They're always going to give Seattle a good game, even when the backups are playing. But I think the Seahawks are going to win the NFC West. And I don't think it may be that they can rest players in week 18 this year. I think Seattle's going to win this division. And I think the Rams are a good team with a great head coach, some very good players, but not as good as the media perhaps are portraying them to be.
Well, we'll get into that in a second. I've got a patron question that is along those lines, so we'll come back around to that. It does occur to me that there's this alternate reality we could be living in where Stafford goes to the Raiders, which was something that was really considered for a while. And if that domino falls, Geno Smith probably is still in Seattle, most likely. And I wonder if Sam Darnold or Jimmy Garoppolo would be the starter in LA. Like, it would have been something like that would have happened if that little merry-go-round if that first domino had fallen. We are where we are, and it's going to be really fascinating to see how that plays out. So let's do this. Let's take some Patron questions, because I let people know this morning that you guys are coming on, and they were excited to ask the two of you a couple questions. So folks, if you want to ask Patron questions, patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get access there. You get ad-free audio. You also get access to the Discord, where we have a special channel for patrons who can ask questions like the ones we're going to ask today. So first one, this comes from Swami. Amani says, when we get to August, what do you need to see to believe with this team? What's holding you back currently? And Rob, since you just talked about the fact you think they're going to win the NFC West, I'm curious, what do you need to see to believe that you're right in that regard?
Well, I suppose the obvious answer is we'd like to see the offensive line not looking dreadful. But I'm optimistic there. I think given I think Robert Saleh's got a great press. The idea that he's going to come back and the defense in San Francisco is going to be unbelievable. I think that's got a bit too much attention. And I think the fact that Seattle now has what looks like a far more competent offensive staff with experience does not get enough attention. And I think that offensive line will be better as a consequence. So I think the main thing for me, if we're going to just park the offensive line for a bit, I just need to see Sam Darnold, as much as you can in August, look as if he can just manage, function, do what he needs to do. I don't think it's very likely that he's going to come in and we're throwing it all over the yard and winning games off his arm on his own. I don't think that's realistic. I think what he needs to do is essentially function in the way that other Shanahan-style quarterbacks have functioned, which is to be a facilitator, to get the ball out when it needs to get out, to sort of read your keys, to do what you need to do. And I think if Darnold can do that, he's not going to have spectacular numbers. He's not going to be an MVP or anything. No one's going to be rushing out maybe to buy his jersey. But if he can just do what he needs to do, then and limit the mistakes and get your ball to Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cup and to Arroyo and whoever else is going to be throwing it to, and if you can get this running game going, then I think that's fine. I don't know how to quantify that in August, but maybe just to sort of see him, because I suppose that's not going to show up. It's not going to be flashy in camp, is it, that you can learn that from? And I don't think a series at the start of, Geno Smith had possibly the single greatest preseason series, one series and done. Was it against the Browns in preseason? And everyone thought Ryan Grubb was a genius then. So you're not necessarily going to learn much of that. But I guess that's what I think that's what pins my optimism on Seattle down to, is whether Darnold can just have a limit the damage, make the plays you need to make, much improved in the red zone, be a facilitator. If he can do that, then I think Seattle can have a good year, a really good year.
Griff, what about you? What do you need to see to believe that the Seahawks team is going to be successful this year?
We're talking preseason performances, right?
Yeah.
So, it's tough, right? You have to look for maybe markers or hints of things to come. You probably could look for some scheme hints in preseason, and you never get the specific stuff, the fancy stuff. But you can't hide the backbone of your structure. That's the one thing, because you can only run the plays that you're practicing. It's not like you have, here's our preseason plays and here's our regular season plays. Like it's just more the vanilla version of what you end up doing in the regular season. So I think if the offense is going to be like better than average, which I think average is totally plausible with this group, like 15th, 16th ranked DVOA, EPA, whatever. If they're going to be on the north side of that, the right side of that, I would like to see a shotgun play action game instituted in the offense. And that means if they run a handful of those in preseason, even if I don't even care what the play calls are, how it attacks the defense, just knowing that, hey, they're actually instituting play action out of shotgun, that would give me some maybe confidence or revive some optimism. And the reason why I say that is because Sam's a really good play action passer. He's not very good at a shotgun last year, even with O'Connell. O'Connell didn't run shotgun play action, and Kubiak also didn't really run shotgun play action. His shotgun offense was a very low volume and very small amount of shotgun snaps, period, but a very low volume drop back game with some complementary run game in there. And the run game is interesting, but I think he needs to shift some of his under center stuff to shotgun so that Sam's shotgun EPA can regain the otherwise lost efficiency that it loses when he's just pure drop back. So I think if they institute some shotgun play action, that could beef the numbers up a little bit. It'd be some reconfiguring from Kubiak, something he hasn't really done before, but Kyle does it. So I think he can do it. And then maybe defensively, like it'd be cool if they can bridge a 3-4 front with nickel personnel. So 3-3-5 personnel. I think that would go a long way in maintaining flexibility and coverage that Mike wants, but then also putting 5 guys up in the line of scrimmage. With the personnel they have, I think they would dominate, and I don't think teams would run on that. But that's not something Mike wanted to do last year. He wanted to be, if he was 5 guys in the line of scrimmage, it was 3-4. Otherwise, it was 4-2-5. We know Fangio and Carroll like the 3-3-5 stuff. Fangio calls it penny. Pete calls it falcon. That's a package that Mike ran maybe 5 snaps of. So we know he has it in his playbook. He just doesn't like to operate out of it a lot. But I think they have the personnel to dominate in that package. So shotgun play action and then 3-3-5 personnel on the other end. If they just put that out on the field, we'll know what plans they have for the regular season. And I think that would increase their chances. So
that's great stuff from both of you. And it's nuanced for me. Here's the thing, guys. I think the number one thing that's going to indicate that this team is going to be successful this year is something that honestly, I don't believe you can see until the regular season. It's the run game. And if I've watched enough of these training camp practices, I've watched enough preseason, like you cannot evaluate how good of a running team you are until you get to the regular season. And, I'll be watching carefully, but it's just hard to evaluate that. So that's to me the number one thing. And so it's going to be really hard to evaluate that part. The other things that you could potentially see, or that I could see, Sam Darnold was one of the things that made him the player he was last year is he was just an assassin on deep throws and explosive passes. I don't know that if I could see them actually showcasing explosive passing with Sam Darnold, that can show up in training camp practices. I was not seeing that a lot in minicamp. A lot of dump offs, a lot of check downs. That's a question mark for the receivers. It's a question mark for Darnold. It's a question mark for Kubiak. So that would be something that would give me some more confidence. The other one I'll throw on the other side is I think Byron Murphy is a bellwether for this team in terms of I think they're going to be a good defense, even if he's just the same player he was last year. But if they're going to be like dominant and they're going to have a 3-year plus window of being dominant, he's got to take a huge step. And so I want to see that show up. Those would be the 2 things I would probably say, in absence of the running game that we can't really evaluate. Rob, we got one specifically for you from Brendan. He says, how does Rob think Wrexham will fare in the championship next season?
Well, they're going to spend a lot of money, so I imagine they'll be pretty good. But for anybody who's watched this, I've personally not watched the Wrexham documentary stuff. I've not seen it. But they are going to hit a wall at some point pretty soon. Because the more that you go up and up and up, the harder it gets. And now they're in a very tough league. So we'll see how they get on. They're going to have to spend an awful lot of money. I don't know how much Ryan Reynolds got for doing Deadpool versus Wolverine, but he may need to do another one of those if Wrexham are going to go any further.
I love it. Love it. All right. We got a question here from Nick Esser, and I'll give this one to you, Mr. Griff. He says, do you think Seattle will make one more big move trade before the season starts?
I think they're going to try. Yeah, I think, there's so much noise about, Micah Parsons is lofty, but the Add and Dirty connection, there's a lot of noise about Trey Hendrickson kind of on and off the record. we know that John likes to make calls. You know, he just checks in. We don't know to what extent anything is going on. But for me, like, this is where I put on my tinfoil hat. Not that I mean, the two independent things going on, but there's the whole Trey Hendrickson thing. It's just not going away. Local radio keeps talking about it. When Mike Salk keeps talking about something ends up happening. He talked about DK Metcalf for like 2 years. He talked about Geno Smith not being along for the Seahawks for like the whole season. He talked about a D-line trade ahead of the Leonard Williams thing for like 8 months. They all end up happening. So maybe I'm not paying attention to when he says something's going to happen and then it doesn't happen. So maybe it's confirmation bias, but he keeps talking about Trey Hendrickson specifically. All right, so there's that part. I'm just keeping that in the back of my mind. Like, I'm trying to learn my lesson with him because I go, no, it's not going to happen, and something happens. But then also, Brady Henderson keeps reporting, and we know that there is some drama. Like, the chances of them extending Tariq Woolen, right or wrong, doesn't seem high. You get a nice comp pick from Tariq Woolen in free agency, but if you've already made the internal decision that you're not going to extend him, you might as well try to get some value out of him. Would they try to flip Woolen in a draft pick for Hendrickson in a draft pick, like pick swap, player swap? I don't know. That's where my mind's going. That's the only area I can think where they would do something. I don't even know if I'd like that. I have some reservations, but I think that John is not idle, at least, if I had to guess. So that's all I got. I don't like to rumor monger, but here I am.
I think people love rumor mongering. Yeah, I don't know. I find myself very concerned about the notion of them moving on from Rick Woolen. I think
I don't like it. I would pay him, but
I think it's going to be harder to replace him than people really realize. We've got a comment here from Alvi, not a question. It says tell Rob and Griff that we love them and need them to do shows every week with us because it's the best show when all three of you are together and it's not even close. So you guys are loved. Know that, if nothing else. All right. So another question here. This comes from Kuiper Duran. And Rob, will start with you. For the 2025 season to be a, quote, successful one, what should we be expecting to see? A playoff game or multiple young stars emerge or Super Bowl window opening? I care less about this year's playoffs and more about the team developing and taking the right steps for the Super Bowl window to open to us. So what does a successful season look like for you?
Successful season to me looks like by the end of the year, the offense looks like an offense that is starting to come together, that it looks like the green shoots there. What does that mean? I think what you said earlier, there's a running game which you can really get behind. I think, what does that look like? I think by the end of the 2011 season, we could all see that the running game was working. So I think something akin to that. I think we need to sort of see an offensive line that, again, is coming together. I don't think that's going to be complete this year. I think you're going to have to do further things next offseason to continue to further bolster that. But if we can get through this season with the offensive line looking decent as opposed to dreadful, I think that would be a huge success. I think it would be good. I think the Seahawks need to make the playoffs. I think they have to find a way. 7 teams get in. They were a bit unlucky last year to get to 10 wins and not get even a wild card there. So I think they have to make the playoffs. I don't think they definitely have to win a playoff game because you may just come up against a really difficult team. You might have to go on the road. So I'm not banking everything on a successful season, meaning you have to win one playoff game. But I do think there's enough time has passed now where we should be expecting Seattle to get to the playoffs. And with all of the moves that they've made, and with the drafts that they've had and the picks they've used, I think playoffs they have to go and get into the playoffs this year. So that for me, and the continued improvement on the defense. But I'm not expecting a Super Bowl push next season. I think it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Seattle could end up being one of those teams that has a decent run at it because the NFC is quite open. But I think if this time next year we're thinking, right, here we go, they've had another offseason, another draft, they can build on what we saw in 2025. And if this time next year we are dreaming of getting to the NFC Championship legitimately, maybe even winning that game, then I think that's kind of what we need. That will be a success for me.
Griff?
Yeah, I'd like a wild card appearance. I'm with Rob. They don't have to win it. My expectations are relative to what went on in the offseason. I think that for 2025, they went backwards in some spots. I think, though, that progress isn't always linear. So I think they're still set up decently well for 2026, provided the quarterback position is figured out. Maybe it has been already via Darnold. Maybe it hasn't, or maybe it has via Milrow. We just don't know yet. I think the rest of the team, though, the rest of the roster is in good shape, kind of like for the immediate long term, like the 2, 3, 4 year outlook. For 2025, I just want to see a good coaching job and kind of optimizing what they have in front of them. And I think that probably looks like 10 wins, maybe 11 if they really put it together. And I won't hold a wild card loss against them. I think going backwards would be frustrating, though. Like if they were to win 9 games, that would be tough. And then I wonder what kind of consequential changes would occur thereafter. But yeah, so I think a successful season is 10 wins and a wild card appearance.
Yeah, for me on this one, there's the season in isolation. 10 wins and a playoff appearance is probably the simplest way to define success. So that, like, set that aside. But if the bigger question is, how do you start to become a Super Bowl team? What are the indicators of that? Number one for me is the offensive line and the running game, even more than pass protection. Like, does this offensive line create hold? Because it is a secret for the, relative to the topic of the show today. The Seahawks have one of the youngest offensive lines in the NFL. And if they're good this year, which I think right now, I believe they're going to be good. That's my current perspective without having seen pads on. If that's the case, that could be a massive boost to them having a long window to start building a foundation on top of that foundation. So that's one. Byron Murphy, I already mentioned. That's two. And then the other thing that I would call out is I think this tight end room. We talk a lot about the receivers. JSN, obviously, he's taken a step. I expect him to be good again. If this tight end room, if AJ Barner can be a player I think he's capable of being, if Elijah Arroyo can be a difference maker, I'll throw Torrey Horton in at receiver. If we can find a playmaker outside of JSN as a receiver, that would be the other thing. Like, those are the things to me that would start saying, all right, now, the last thing I'll throw in there is if Jalen Milrow can get in there as a sub-package player and be effective and show promise, like, all of those would be strong, successful markers for starting to open up what could be a more interesting window of CX competition. So those would be the ones that jump out to me. Good question there. All right. Let me ask you guys one more, and then I'll let you guys head out for whatever's going on for you. This is an older one, but this comes from Hockey and Manifesto. It says, are either of you concerned about Sam Darnold after what Brian has shared regarding what he saw in OTAs? And if you didn't hear what I saw, let me know. But are either of you concerned about what you've based on what you've heard about Sam Darnold in OTAs?
It's that he's looked a little erratic, right? With the ball control and the footwork and everything.
For me, it was initially footwork and then also just accuracy and judgment. Those were three things that kept coming up for me.
So my answer to that is it's a glass half full, glass half empty thing. I'm not worried by that because he's in a new environment and he tends to have some psychological thing with when he's not comfortable, like everything falls apart for him a little bit. That's reflected a little bit by his home road splits in Carolina and Minnesota. So when he's on the road, his play action numbers remain good. His deep ball numbers remain good, but then his pure dropbacks, the gun stuff drops dramatically going from home to away. And that's when you have to be in tune with your center, the protection thing. So you think about, he's in a new team, right? And he's getting accustomed to like his new environment and everything. He's just not adapted to his new environment. I think it's just a psychological thing. He just needs to gain comfort. I think it relates to the home field split. So I really don't have any doubts that eventually he'll find his arm. From what I've heard, like people like Nate Tice, Charles McDonald, when they've been in camp with Darnold in San Francisco, in New York, they say he looks like a top 5 pick when he's comfortable and ripping it. So this is so early with the new team. I'm sure come August, he'll be making highlight throws, throwing on air and all that stuff, and it'll be fine. So I'm not worried about it. It's kind of in line to me with who he's always been, that he's this, psychologically correlated with this, comfort level and all that. So,
Rob,
I'm not too concerned about it at the minute. I think my expectations for Sam Darnold are probably quite reasonably low anyway. I think next season, like I said, for me, you have brought in an offense that is going to probably run a bit like Shanahan's, and that is it's an offense that Jimmy Garoppolo was able to operate to make a Super Bowl. And I'm not making a comparison between Garoppolo and Darnold here, but I don't really expect that much from Darnold. Like, I just want him to do the basics right. Now, from what you're saying, the basics weren't particularly right in this particular camp, but it is quite early. I think I'm prepared to give him sort of 3 or 4 games in the regular season before panicking. So I think it'll all be fine. I think that this is it's probably a bit too early to have any concerns there. But if the big thing for me is if we get to 4 or 5 games into the season and he looks really bad, what do you do then? Like, do you stick by a guy who's not playing very well and potentially ruin the season? They're probably not going to go to Jalen Milroe. They'll probably go to Drew Lock instead. I mean, that to me does not feel like a. So it's that's the worry, I guess, is that you don't have that clear, and until the Seahawks have that clear franchise quarterback, they don't really have to worry about anymore. That could take 10 years, 15 years to find. So I'm not going to panic about that. I heard what you said. I heard what a number of other people said. I think Greg Bell said it was something like it wasn't like Sam Howell, but it was close. None of that's encouraging, but I'll give it a bit of time.
I think that's wise. I think that is wise. All right, Rob, what is coming up for you over at Seahawks Draft Blog? Anything going on this time of year?
Not so much at the minute. So what are we? The 29th of June. I would imagine that probably towards the middle of July, I will start digging into players for next season. I mean, I've already watched a load of them who didn't declare, so I'll start watching the ones who are eligible this year. I really don't want to watch the quarterbacks. Like, I feel like after a few years, I've kind of burnt out of watching quarterbacks. And there's a long list. I started watching Klubnik from Clemson, and I had to turn it off after 3 games because I just needed a break from quarterback watching. But I'm going to get into all that in probably about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'll be back blogging and video streaming regularly when training camp's back. So very much looking forward to that.
Can't wait. Griff, how about you? What's going on at Seattle Overload?
Theoretically, maybe more hypothetically, we'll be doing a live tape watch of some of the prospects. I think we'll start with Eamon Warren, just so that full transparency, we can share what we think we see. And those are always fun because sometimes we end up changing our opinion in real time, talking it out with each other. So, that will be coming up soon, maybe next Saturday, maybe the following weekend. So we're a little more sparse these days, but we'll get a new episode out eventually. We had one this morning, so.
Love it. All right. We've got a quick note here for a super chat from It Is What It Is. Says, I'm thinking about some memories. I remember being a Seahawks dinner in 1983 when I was young and had my picture taken with Dave Craig and Harold Jackson last year of Harold's career. Well, that is a nice memory, and I appreciate the super chat. All right, folks, make sure you follow Rob Staton at Seahawks Draft Blog and Griff Sturgeon at Seattle Overload. I'm Brian Emhauser. Make sure you give the show a like, click subscribe. I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your Sunday.